So that was the media briefing by the heads of law enforcement in the country, of course, led by the NPA head, Shamila Batoyi. And importantly, just a few highlights from, in particular, the Q&A that took place. One of the key questions asked by journalists there is, how close are we to seeing at least the very first case stemming out of the state capture inquiry? And the response was that, there's not going to be any announcement as to who the person being pursued is or who the persons being pursued are, but they'll simply swoop onto those people because they don't want, I guess, to give a heads up. But importantly, what is there to note is that these cases are well in advance. And the other question was about the close working relationship between this new directorate that's going to deal primarily with the cases or the cases, indeed, that are coming from the state capture inquiry. How close is the working relationship between the Commission and the Directorate? Well, the head of that unit, Advocate Cronje, saying that they are working closely with the Commission, particularly with regards to witnesses whose evidence that they're going to want to use. Also, just importantly, to highlight what Advocate Hermione Cronje is going to be dealing with. She says that there's going to be three focus areas in as far as the prosecutions of these cases are concerned. It's going to be corruption in the security sector. That's primarily the criminal justice system. You heard Batoyi saying that there was a systematic weakening of the criminal justice system. There's also going to be a focus on state-owned enterprises. I mentioned there Eskom, PRASA, and other entities. And the third element is high-level public and private sector corruption. So for the time being, let's just remind you of what has been said thus far. NPA head Shamila Batoyi saying that the authority is serious about tackling corruption. She says a lot more needs to be done to improve matters at the prosecuting body. Batoyi was giving an update on the situation at the authority since taking office in February.
An important role for that the NPA has to fulfill is to undertake effective prosecutions. The country is crying out for this. But the NPA is about much more than only prosecuting cases in court. Long after crimes have been committed, the work of the NPA must and will make an effective contribution to the country's socio-economic development. In addition to all the other crime types that the NPA has to focus on, including sexual and gender-based crimes, corruption, as we all know, has become endemic in our society. There is, understandably, tremendous hunger and impatience for justice, and the expectations for immediate arrests are high. The proclamation of the Investigation Directorate is an important step to restoring the rule of law in South Africa. The SAPS and the NPA are working closely to ensure that we are able to address the scourge of corruption in our society and in our country at different levels. The Provincial Commissioner has committed his full support and the support of SAPS to the work of the Investigating Directorate.
All right, I'm joined in studio now by Casper Badenhorst, and he is an attorney from Ulrich Roux and Associates. Mr. Badenhorst, let's delve straight into the workings of this investigative directorate that's going to be led by Advocate Cronje. Importantly, she says that they're going to be tackling a small number of cases so that they do not allow for cases to either fall through the cracks or avoid duplication. Does that make their work easier but also more focused so that they are successful at the end of the day?
Yes, no, absolutely. I think it's needed at this point. And I think we're almost moving into a new era where there's a lot of cleaning up that's happening. And from that previous era, there's been, as we all know, a lot of corruption, a lot of issues that South Africans have had to face in terms of just absolute misuse of and exactly what the new directorate is focusing on. There's been a lack of focus on those specific areas, and this is absolutely needed in terms of ensuring that those matters are prosecuted to the fullest. So it's absolutely a needed aspect within the NPA.
Your thoughts on this directorate that is going to be essentially manned by people who are engaged on a contractual basis? The director saying that these people are not going to be engaged on a full-time basis because perhaps of budgetary constraints, but there is a lot of support. They're fully confident that the unit will be adequately funded. What are your thoughts on that? And importantly, drawing skills both from public and private sector wherever they can be found.
And that's the one thing that I feel very encouraged about, is that we are appointing people that are experts in those fields. You know, even like Advocate Butlander, he's a well-known advocate, and his expertise will be highly appreciated in that regard. I mean, and especially for Advocate Cronje as well. She's someone who's been within the NPA for almost 20 years, and it's you know, we need that experience. She's had overseas experience within the UN and with the World Bank, and also within the NPA in ensuring those, like the forfeiture asset units are founded and started. And my point is that getting people on such a contractual basis, we are getting people with the expertise that is needed in prosecuting those specific aspects that they are focusing on. So I'm very encouraged with that, yes.
The other element I want to tackle is that is meant to give confidence to members of the public. The heads there, all of them, I think they spoke with one voice that there is a huge amount of expectation from ordinary South Africans to see cases now actually going to court, see people being arrested. Importantly, how they answered the question about how close are we to seeing the first case being dealt with, and the response is, we're not going to announce, we're simply going to swoop, and these cases are well in advance. Does that give confidence?
Absolutely. There's no favor. You know, there's no favor in terms of how they're going to proceed with their mandate in prosecuting criminal offences. And it is encouraging to see that the NPA are standing as one. The NPA, SAPS, and obviously the Hawks as a division there. And that is encouraging. They are standing as one voice. And I think that's what South Africa desperately needs, is a strong unit, because these people work together and they need to assist each other in their investigations and in their prosecutions. And that's, if we can have a strong unit of a prosecuting authority assisted by a police service that is strong, I mean, it'll be unstoppable.
Just finally, on this particular point, and I think it's quite important given where we come from in as far as the prosecution of high-profile individuals, in particular politicians. The question is about whether or not, how they're going to deal with people who are going to say, well, there are political motives to why we're being pursued by the prosecutions. So there is that accusation that they say they expect, and Batoy is saying that, well, that's going to happen. Well, we'll deal with it, because that is what has constantly, or how these investigations have constantly been framed in the public sphere. Do you think that that also gives a certain level of trust that we have people in these offices that are ready to tackle whatever comes their way?
No, absolutely. And look, in any matter that is investigated, in any trial that is brought, there's always evidence to test things. So if there are allegations of political motivation, there's always evidence to test. Even with the Zuma matters now, you know, there is
exactly, that's the case in point.
Yes, and the averment that it's a politically motivated issue. But there's evidence to be tested. I'm not saying there's evidence necessary to convict him. We don't know yet, but that has to be tested. And that, you know, one can always throw out the phrase of political motivation and attempting to bring another person down for personal benefit or gain as a politician. But there's evidence, and evidence needs to be tested, and that's how we deal with in the South African legal system. It has to go to court. We have to test the evidence.
Just very, very briefly, we are out of time, but interestingly, talking about the Zuma case, there's this new evidence that his team intends putting forward at the KwaZulu-Natal High Court. How likely is it that the court will allow for that to be introduced?
Well, look, if it is an absolute necessity to test that, the veracity of whatever is being, and they'll obviously, the NPA will put up their arguments as to why it must be allowed, because they will say there's crucial evidence that needs to be allowed. That is, one can do that. Obviously, the test for that is to see whether it is absolutely crucial in bringing forth whatever needs to be prosecuted. So it is possible that it could be. They just need to be able to substantiate why it's crucial evidence in that case.
Casper Badenhorst, thank you very much for your time. He is an attorney with Ulrich Roux and Associates.